Um, this is everybody here. We have a bigger roster than usual. So I work at Preset. All of us work at Preset. I work on Superset mostly. You've probably seen me on the repo. Max is our fearless leader, founder, CEO. Amin has built a bunch of the stuff that's going to be demoed today. So thank you for doing that. And Sophie and Elizabeth, also from Preset, have been spearheading the efforts of all of our AI efforts in general and bringing this stuff into the world. So thank you all for joining us. Now let's first talk about what is MCP, Model Context Protocol. Probably many of you are joining this because you know what it is and just want to see what we've done with it. But for those who don't know, this is open and widely adopted standard where LLMs are given a suite of tools. And you can, like it says, you can think of this as USB-C. It kind of allows anything to connect to anything, and it allows these LLMs to have the tools to figure out what's in their tool bag and give them competencies and things they can access. And so once these LLMs are able to discover tools that you provide them via an MCP service, they can do all kinds of things with your data to understand the structure of it, what's in there, what they can build with it. And you can use these standardized calls to accomplish all these tasks. We'll go into a lot more detail about that. Now, how this applies to analytics is that any LLM, whether you're using, Claude or something from OpenAI or whatever, can connect to these MCP services via the MCP protocol. And that gives this tool access to your superset instances or your preset workspaces, and it gives it wide open access to all of your data to do all kinds of things, whether you want to build dashboards, build charts, write SQL, or describe charts and data sets that exist, all kinds of things. There's over 20 tools and more every day that are built right now, and we'll go into a lot of these capabilities. But it all uses the same permission system as Superset and Preset, so it's safe to use, and we'll go into how that all works, starting with the Superset layer, the open source foundation of all of this. So Amin, take it away.
Hi,
Yippee.
everybody. So thanks, Evan, for kicking us off. And I'm just going to go through a couple of slides here before we dive into the demo. One of the important things about the architecture that we put a lot of focus into was this library first approach, where many of the solutions that existed at the time were kind of using a bridge, using an API call or CLI call, somehow calling the source of truth for those functionalities. The approach we took with Superset MCP gives it better scalability and robustness in that it's a standalone deploy and allows the code of Superset to be used as a library versus, having to contact it over the network, for example. So what we did was create, as Evan was saying, a complete tool catalog. It's not fully complete yet. We have a roadmap to finish it all, as there's a lot of API calls available in Superset that we're trying to have parity with. But right now we have tools for charting, dashboard creation update, retrieve your data set information so you can search what you have, as well as being able to execute open-form SQL. And some of the system tools that allow the LLMs to figure out what's going on and to help the efficiency of the calls.
This is actually where we'll hand over the wheel and do a little bit of a demo so people can see this in action. Then we'll go after the demo into explaining a lot more of how it works kind of under the hood.
A quick note on the philosophy. The idea is really to expose everything that a user can do in the UI to an LLM, pretty much. So that means like listing chart, creating charts, creating dashboards, running SQL, and all of that is done while the agent has the same level of access as the user. So you'll see that in the demo.
Okay, cool. We're going to do a demo on the MCP. I'm coming in here. Let's pretend I'm a data analyst. I want to try to understand some of the revenue trends in my video game, the sales numbers that I have. We're going to use AI at every stage. So from finding data, running analysis, building visuals, assembling a dashboard. So touching upon all those tools that Amin was just mentioning. And we're going to be able to do it all without leaving our AI assistant here. So I'm going to show the MCP connected through Claude here today. But we'd be able to connect this to other AI clients or tools that you guys are using. And I'm also going to use some voice to chat here, so you'll see me talking to it. But first, let's start with what tools do you have access to for working in Preset? And so it's going to get a list of those tools that we were just showing. Like I mentioned, we're not locked into any one client here. So this will be, the MCP is compatible with the tools that your team already uses. Once you're a preset user, the connection is really quick to set up. And later on in the slides, we'll have also a link to our documentation for setting things up and getting started. So here we have that tool list right here. So right out of the box, the AI can list data sets, explore your metadata, create and update charts, build dashboards, run SQL, and more. And all these things, it's not just able to read the data that you have in Preset, it can also take action inside the platform. And like Max mentioned, we're going to get to a place where anything that the user can do in the product, the AI can also do programmatically. So now that we've done a list of the tools, let's see what data we have that we're working with. I want to do some analysis on revenue. What data sets do we have that are relevant? Can you tell me about the columns and what we could do with each of them?
So one of the most interesting tool, I think, is execute SQL, right? So that enables the agent to run SQL as you. It will enforce the same data access policy as the user has. And behind the scene, that allows to do all sorts of anomaly detection or what if analysis, root cause analysis. So that tool is super powerful.
Yeah, and here in this case, I didn't give it exactly what the table name is because I might not have known it. I'm asking more of a business question and letting the AI kind of help me find what's relevant. And it was able to find some information here and tell me what I'm working with. So kind of the same things that an analyst might do if they're in the UI, but obviously, like, I was able to do this without clicking through things, without kind of manually parsing through everything and figuring out what's there. It's able to give me all that information and some suggestions. And so we're gonna go dig into this data, video game sales data. We can see we have some region information, so maybe we can start there and see how things break down geographically. How do the video game sales break down across different regions, and how has that balance shifted over the years? And so here, like Max mentioned, I think it'll start with writing some SQL first, execute that SQL against the data warehouse that we have connected on Preset. Yeah, so here, it's executing some SQL for me.
Maybe while this does some work, something that we've observed is that as you start composing different MCP servers, or if you call from a Claude code that has access to, say, your DBT pipelines or your data engineering pipelines, if you also connect your agent to, I don't know, Airflow MCP or DBT MCP, or give it some source code, it can really, get some information about the data lineage. We've seen really good results to working with a data catalog in parallel. So there's a lot of semantics in Preset that the agent can use, but if you give it, other MCPs, it will really start to do wonders.
Yeah, so right there, I was able to run some queries for me, give me the results and give me some explanation here as well. And then here I can kind of do follow-up, kind of as I would do in a normal conversation, just asking what my next logical question is. And then because it has all the context, it's going to build upon what we were looking at before. Didn't have to, tell it again what data set we're looking at. It just is able to kind of go into the next step here and help with insights that will be able to drive business decisions here. So far we've been running queries and getting some analysis that way. We can also, start to build some charts, and then all those things would be saved into Preset so that you have something visual, and then you also have something shareable because it's saved on Preset. You can share with your colleagues more easily. So let's create a bar chart showing the total video game sales by region.
Yeah, while this processes, I see a question asking, like, can we preview dashboard or charts within Claude itself, and there's a clear limitation on Claude where it won't let you do cross-site scripting of any kind. So it's really hard or impossible to embed a chart or render a chart in Claude Desktop or in Claude.ai, Cloud. But other clients that support it can do it. And then the agent will give you some links. It can also give you some data tables in some cases. But yeah, there's just a limitation of Cloud Desktop itself where we can't really embed things. We're looking for ways to do it in the future so we can embed the charts straight in the chat. So probably through a Claude app eventually built on our MCP, we'll be able to do that.
Yeah, so here we switched gears and generated a chart. It found the data set that we were talking about, set all those dimensions and metrics, and is building that chart. And this chart will stay here in my preset workspace. So yeah, I was able to, with one sentence, do the chart without any drag and dropping of things, figuring out all my metrics. I was just able to describe it and get it built inside preset. And if I want to make any, let's do maybe a different chart here. Now let's create a line chart showing the global video game sales over time by year. So again, it's going to handle that configuration and then save a chart for me. And Max mentioned a little bit about the previews. I'm going to give a quick teaser that we'll share a little bit about later on in the slides as well. But we're working on a chatbot within Preset. And then within Preset, that chatbot, you'll be able to do all the same things that we're doing from here because it's powered by the MCP. But we're also able to do nice things like drop a chat preview right in the chatbot. So you'll be able to see that without leaving your context. Cool. So got a line chart of my sales. If I want to make some changes to that, I can also ask for modifications. So I can say, can you break that down by publisher and show the top 5 publishers? And then it's kind of, it can start with what we had and go and modify, make those changes that we're looking at, that we're asking for. So really able to enabling me to kind of iterate on my work through just conversation and dig into areas that seem interesting to me. Ooh, I didn't make sure. I'll just do a quick reminder too, if people have questions, try to find the Q&A section in the Zoom chat and drop the questions in the Q&A. It'll be easier for us to manage and answer them there. So not the chat section for questions, but the Q&A section.
Right. And there are some coming in. Hopefully you can all see the answers. We'll stop and reread some of those as well.
Yep. Cool. So got that chart broken down by publisher. And then, of course, if we want to put all these things on a dashboard, we can do that. So can you save that chart that we just created and then add the bar chart we had to a new dashboard called Video Game Revenue Analysis? Can you also add 2 more interesting charts to that dashboard? So here I'm kind of giving it kind of an open-ended prompt to just help us create some more charts for the dashboard for the purposes of the demo. But if if you had something more specific in mind, of course you can give it more direction about I want another scatter plot on this specific thing or whatever that might be. But yeah, here in one prompt, I'm able to get charts created, get that dashboard created, add those things that we've already looked at, and have something that will be ready for me to share with my colleagues. Okay. So 2 of those charts that we built earlier on, and then it built some new charts for us here. Yeah, so that's a demo of the tools that we have right now. But just quickly to recap, we, in just a couple of minutes started with some questions, was able to find the data that I needed in my workspace, did some discovery, had it generate queries for me, was able to, really ask questions in the language that I wanted, and I didn't have to write any SQL, didn't have to do any chart building, drag and drop, manual configuration, and was able to get to a dashboard with a bunch of charts pretty quickly.
So I think this is where we actually hand it back to Amin to talk about how this thing works a little bit under the hood.
So awesome demo. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Evan. And I think some of this slide was kind of, already a question that I pasted some of the stuff into. So when using the preset MCP, superset MCP instances, there's a zero privilege escalation, meaning role-based access controls, role level security, and column restrictions are all enforced the same as if you were calling these things through the API, CLI, or using it through the UI. MCP can't give any extra permissions that aren't there. So we have a preview first workflow, meaning you might be working with your LLM and trying to explore what things look like. You don't want to have those end up as temporary, partial looking results. So preview first, you refine, and then save, and you can edit, update later. After you save it, then it's remaining there for people to see in your team. We have a middleware architecture that allows us a lot of robustness and easily be able to adjust things such as do logging, authorization, budget enforcement, certain permissions, and even do compatibility between the different layers. So now we're going to talk about the Preset MCP service, which is the enterprise capabilities layered on top of the open source Superset. So what Preset adds is, here in this slide summarized into very concise boxes, multiple tenant isolation, enterprise authentication, such as OAuth 2.1 or 2.0, that allows that seamless integration with Claude Code, Claude Desktop, or any of them really. We have a big matrix of support. I think we support up to 20 something, maybe less, but up to that. You can enable things per workspace, production level, Kubernetes, dedicated pods, audit logs, and in-app preset chatbot, as some people already alluded to, which really keeps you in the context of preset workspace, which you're looking at, and you can ask questions about it. So it's really a enterprise experience on top of the open source. And for the authentication, of course, there's the jot mode, which you can use your API key to generate one, but we also have OAuth 2.1 and coming soon. Superset already has this. Preset will be also adding API key authentication for those who prefer to have that instead of OAuth, for particularly like service to service connections would prefer that. So here's a little matrix showing just basically what we talked about, differences between the open source and preset versions of the same MCP. And for any documentation, here's some barcodes to scan. You can set up your MCP server authentication, see some overviews, and have a look at our API CI/CD. So what comes next? We want to get parity between, MCP. You can have a tool do half the things that the source of truth does. So we're going to get additional chart tools, dataset tools, basically everything you can do in the Preset Superset UI, you'll be able to do with the MCP service. Of course, grain of salt, maybe some things. We haven't gone through all of those things in full detail yet. But the idea is to get full parity.
So for people that are already Preset customers, talk to your CSM, customer success manager, to get it enabled. If you're not yet a customer and are interested, you can use that QR code to contact our sales team and get set up so you can start trying this out. And I gave a quick preview of this. I mentioned this earlier, but we are also working on a preset chatbot. So if you have users that you want to allow them to use some of these tools right in the preset workspace itself, that's something that will be coming as well. So it's powered by the same MCP, but you'll be able to access it in the UI, and then there will be some nice things too, like being able to see that those charts that you create right in your chat window without having to leave. And if we go to the next slide, we do have a upcoming preset webinar on the chatbot that will be soon. So you can register for that.
In fact, here's the registration page. I'm going to drop this link in the chat there. I also wanted to highlight a few pages and blogs that I'll also drop into the chat. The first is our AI page, where we kind of talk a little bit about the chatbot, what it's capable of, and going into some of the preset AI and FAQ stuff. So I'll drop that. Then there's the Preset MCP blog post that goes into quite a bit of detail around the Preset MCP announcement and how to get your hands on it. Then there's two technical blog posts. One is about how the Preset MCP service was built on top of Superset's open source offering. So there's a lot of good info in here about the preset specific details you can dive into. And then if you're an open source Superset user and you want to know about the open source MCP offering that's available in core Superset, this is the technical deep dive that goes into all the gory details. Thanks, Amin, for writing that one. And you can get that link in the chat as well. So if we want, we should probably hop over and address some of the questions. There's been a lot of them coming in, so maybe Elizabeth or anyone else that's been monitoring them wants to kind of highlight a few of the good ones.
I think I've seen it come up a few times already, so I'll address it first on if you're an existing customer, feel free to reach out to your customer success manager to talk about getting access. And then if you're not yet a customer, maybe Evan, if you want to pull up that contact sales QR code again, the contact QR code. If you're not a customer, if you're not sure, feel free to contact and reach out. We can help you get started.
There it is.
But yeah, there should be self-service very soon too, where in Manager, or it should be really easy to just check a box very soon to switch it on.
And if you're not a Preset customer, you can sign up and you get an enterprise trial going. And then during that phase, reach out.
I'm not sure if it's part of trial today too. It should be. If it's not, so super easy for us to switch it on. When progressive rollout, want to make sure everything works perfectly for everyone before we go full GA on it. But it should be days, maybe weeks before, like everyone can switch this on fairly easily.
Yeah. Just feel free to reach out at this point if you have any questions, and we'll help get you pointed in the right direction.
Now, one thing that's been coming up a lot, maybe Max can actually speak to this one. How can people write skills for their LLMs to improve their responses, maybe based upon their own company structure, any sort of knowledge that they want to give to the LLM?
Right. So you can connect to Preset MCP from any tool out there, right? So you could, in theory, connect from OpenClaw or from just Claude Code or Codex. And if you do so, then you can just do the normal way to set up your skills or MCP connections. So that's where you can really start to compose, skills and MCP tools and data warehouse documentation within, that whatever framework you're using. Internally, we use something called Agor. That's at agor.live. We could flash their website. That's a framework that we built for ourselves. We're probably going to do some webinar arounds, but it's an agent orchestrator that wraps a lot of these agentic coding SDKs, so we can serve Claude Code, Codex, Gemini, and we're seeing some really good results internally by having these like agents that have a memory system, that have skills, that have access to documentation, they can learn. So we're seeing some really good result on that. I've got a blog post on our internal data bot that's pretty interesting. So I got one of our internal agent that's using the Preset MCP and composing it with other MCPs that are really useful to us. Yeah, that's the guest post, Datagore, the Preset internal agent. So that one is pretty interesting. That's kind of how we do it for our agents that have access to our documentation, our MCPs that we use every day. And we're seeing some really good results from that. So if you encourage people to check out Agor, that's open source project that does agent orchestration, and it becomes a bit of a control plane for all your agents if you're interested.
While we're flashing some blogs, some people were asking about metadata and context around data sets, and it's probably worth mentioning that semantic layers can be of great assistance here. And there's a recent blog post talking about kind of the importance of semantic layers in regards to AI accessibility of your data. So you can check this one out. It goes into a whole story about that, but also Superset and Preset are developing a whole bunch of semantic layer support in the very near future. And a lot of that's built around the Superset Extensions Initiative. And there's a whole lot of semantic layer news coming up in the near future. So we'll keep you posted.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit more about semantic layers, but we've seen the emergence of a fair amount of semantic layers over the past few years. So Snowflake's got one, Databricks got one. There are some pretty interesting ones just kind of popping out, and we decided to pretty much support them all. So that's our plan. So since there's no convergence in terms like people rallying around a specific semantic layer, we decided to support them all. The semantic layers are super useful for agents, right? They become guardrails for them to run safer queries, maybe instead of like writing SQL and potentially getting a join wrong. So that's something that I think very soon we're going to have support for all the most popular semantic layers, and you'll have the ability to query them through MCP or to read them through MCP. So your agent, if you have access to run SQL, it will run SQL. If you have a semantic layer, it will be able to do dimensional queries against that semantic layer. One thing we've observed too is that I call them soft semantic layer. So semantic layer as a markdown file can work very, very well too. So that means, it's possible for you to give the semantics to your agent in the form of markdown files, and your agent will do pretty well with just semantic layer as a documentation page. I'll take one that I read that I thought was interesting is like, can your agent generate charts that perhaps are not supported inside Preset? So maybe you want to do a very intricate, unique data visualization, and then we see our agents do that by creating artifacts. So in Claude Desktop, if you use Claude Desktop and by Claude AI now, your agent's able to create a small React app or a small JavaScript app and render it in a panel on the side. So your agent can use the Preset MCP to run some SQL, get the data, and generate intricate data visualization. So we've had very good results with it. The downside here is that it's confined to your session typically. So, there's no way to publish those Claude Desktop artifacts, or no easy way out of the box. So they're very kind of ephemeral and personal. But I think very soon, we'll see agents being able to, maybe publish a micro app and share it with someone.
There's a question about whether the LLM will have the same role as the user, or if we could assign a separate role just for the LLM. So if the user itself has access to PII, but you don't want to give the LLM access to PII, for example. So
we do have some future work for allowing the authentication to define some scopes exactly to say, hey, this is like a read-only connection, or has access to read-write tools, or to write tools as well. So in that case, I think we can accommodate functionalities similar to that.
Yeah, there's also functionality in your harness, right? So if you use Claude Code, or most of the tools that will connect to MCP have an approval request flow, right? So the first time you use a tool, you can say, allow it once, always allow for this session. So that's one way that you can scope some of the tools. Now, in terms of data access policy that we're looking, we spoke with early onboarders, and there's clearly a need for some people to basically compose the role to say, my user has this access role, but I want the LLM to have a different access role. So that's definitely something we want to support. I think at first you'll be able to assign a specific role to the LLM, and eventually you might be able to do set operation on permission to say, I want the same data access right as the user minus these schemas, or minus a set of permissions. Something we did not necessarily talk about, but the Preset Chatbot is pretty interesting. It can do behind the scene, it's using the same MCP, but there are some cool things. So like we saw in the screenshot, we're able to embed chart within Chatbot session. That's positive. And then the agent also knows the context you're in. So if you're in SQL Lab and you have failed SQL, you can say like, hey, can you help me debug this SQL, or what's happening with my SQL? And the agent knows what you're looking at within that app. So that's a bit of an advantage by, operating within the context of the app. There will also be, you'll see at the demo if you join the webinar for the Preset Chatbot. But one thing we're going to be able to do is like, or having these like triggers, right? So you could be looking at a chart and have a trigger that's like, explain this chart. So these nice little shortcuts too.
Yeah, there are a handful of questions about the preset chatbot. I think for this, we're going to leave it as more or less a teaser to join us at our next webinar where we're actually going to show that on its launch. But if you want to see it live in the meantime, the best thing you can do is hit up the preset contact sales link on our website, or it says talk to us at the top of the website. And we can set up a kind of one-on-one demo for you if you're interested in checking it out in advance.
If you want to talk to engineers, so you can talk to sales, but in reality, you know, the team is like, talk to an expert. So, you know, it's pretty easy to have more direct access to engineers or to us, or the people who built the MCP more directly too.
There were some questions about tools as well. Somebody was asking about like CSS templating and things like that. What can and can't the MCP service do right now? And I was relaying the answer that basically now that all the fundamentals are in place and the thing is out, it's a matter of just putting more tools in the toolbox. And those can be added incrementally. And we'll get to the point, hopefully, where the MCP service and thus the chatbot are able to do basically everything you could do in the UI. But I don't know, I mean, if you want to go into like what you see as kind of the nearest term roadmap on the coming soon tools and things like that, or
yeah, not to comment on specifics of like whether it will support CSS or not. Basically, whatever the UI supports is what we want to have full support. So we want to be able to allow you to make a chart and then make that configured to however you can in the app. And we'll just have to prioritize the high value ones first. But we're in the age of AI, so that's not going to be like a very long timeline before we have that full parity. Before you know it, it will do everything and more. So based on requests coming in.
Something kind of interesting is that API design for machines. So traditional API design is fairly different from, you know, designing APIs for agent. And a lot of the work that we've done is around presenting an API that's very intelligible for agents and can work with. I think if you remember, like a year ago when we first started playing with that, agents had all sorts of trouble just calling simple tools, right? The MCP standard was not quite there. The models were not as good, or maybe they had not been, they hadn't had, you know, RL or training on tools specifically. So agents are becoming much better with tools, but there's still this challenge of like exposing the API that's very comprehensive for the agent, and that's what we've done, you know, in this first phase, and we can essentially cover the entire API through like an agentic API that works for agents.
There's another question that just came in. Let's imagine the MCP a year from now. What can we dream of?
I would say like full coverage, right? So it's like a preset. Superset's got more and more features. I think having full coverage is one thing. I think there's, you know, more and more features, maybe some agentic endpoints. So your agent can ask a tool that's actually an LLM endpoint. So have a conversation with an agent doing things. Definitely something we can see more and more.
If I could give like a vague answer, I would say it's going to be a lot more magical, where it's just going to take you from question to insight. You might not even have to look at a chart. I mean, like it probably will do that for you too, and just give you the summary of what's going on. Maybe if you connect enough other things to it, even will tell you what to do, or maybe it will just tell you it's done.
Yeah, one thing we're seeing, you know, internally too, is like more and more of these agents with agency, where agency is like the agent is able to make decision, be proactive. So that means like, I think this year we're going to see agents being able to produce report overnight, create dashboard, do anomaly detection, root cause analysis. And by the time you wake up, you know, you already have a dashboard explaining the thing that needs your attention that day.
There were a couple of questions about kind of what sort of semantic layer support and metadata you get with Superset and Preset out of the box without adding your own semantic layer integration. Maybe we could talk about how the dataset concept in Superset and Preset is kind of a lightweight semantic layer. So you can define metrics and ad hoc columns and things there. and give them just a little bit of a light description that the MCP tool does have access to. And there's a lot of granular permission-based kind of questions that are a little bit nuancy. I don't know if we want to answer those for everybody here, but that's one of those things probably like if you want to try it and you're worried about the tool having access that it shouldn't, you can look into the blog posts to read a bit more. You can reach out via the contact sales link and, kind of ask all the technical questions you want when you're considering enabling it. And we'll get into the details that are most relevant to you individually there.
There was an interesting question about SUP, the Superset CLI, which is part of our agentic strategy, right? So we have like kind of three big pillars. So there's the MCP that we demoed today. Then there's the Preset Chatbot, soon to have a webinar to show it to people. And then then there's Superset SUP, which is the kind of preset made CLI for Superset. And that CLI can be used by agents, right? So if you're in Claude Code, Codex, Gemini CLI, you can install a subskill or just tell your agent to download and use this Superset CLI. And this agent or this CLI enables the agent to manage assets as code. So in some ways, it's an alternative interface for agents. So agents do very well with CLIs. They do very well with MCP. But the CLI's got features around synchronizing assets across workspaces, allowing you to back up some of your charts and dashboards and objects. It also allows the agent to run SQL through like a CLI interface. So just an alternative way to give your agent access to Preset.
Yeah, we flashed Agor for a minute, but I think to answer that kind of what's exciting about the future question a little bit more, this kind of multi-agent orchestration layer that you can get your hands on in the near future or start experimenting with on your own right now is really interesting. That the Superset and Preset MCP services aren't the only tools that these LLMs are going to have access to. So like Max was saying, if you add other MCPs for pieces of your data stack, those all kind of become one big combined Swiss Army knife, but then you can add in skills and CLIs like SUP. And when you have this kind of growing suite of capabilities that the LLM has at its disposal, it becomes a pretty wide playing field where there's a lot of capability at hand.
I gave a talk 2 weeks ago about what does it take for an agent to be really effective as a data practitioner, as a data engineer. And, we could do a webinar on the topic, but what I think the story there is as you compose, to do any kind of meaningful work in the data space, you need access to multiple tools, right? As a data engineer, as a data analyst, you're going to, use Preset for chats and dashboard. You're going to use DBT to create new models. You're going to use a data dictionary. Sometimes you're going to have to refer to your data pipeline codes and a code. So what I would encourage people to do here, now that you have access to the Preset MCP, is create, an agent or create a space. And maybe that's in a repo connected with Claude Code on top or Codex, where you give access to the agent to your data pipeline code. So it can look at lineage. You give it access to Preset where it can, look at charts and dashboard and create them. And then giving it access to other tools, right? To Airflow MCP or other tools. And as these things come together, you start to really have an agent that can do some really solid like data engineering work, can submit pull requests to fix your data pipelines, can run SQL to do deep analysis, all this good stuff.
As you think about, with LLMs, context is king. So as you think about putting an LLM on top of your database or an LLM on top of your semantic layer, think about the more context you add, the more accurate your results are going to be. So if you're forming charts and dashboards, and then you put an LLM on top of that, you're going to get consistent results. It's going to be reading off of your charts, instead of trying to figure out what query it should be making based upon the scope of your data. So it's a really good way for you to make sure that your results are going to be reliable by setting up charts and dashboards instead of only relying on the semantics of your data. So I just want to point that out as well.
Interestingly, like charts and dashboard and the data set construct and preset is a semantic layer, right? There's a lot of information about which chart are using which data set. There's columns information, there's metric definition, there's descriptions everywhere. Someone asked, I think, in the Q&A too, like, should we provide better chart descriptions and dashboard description? It's like, of course, the more you give your LLM, the more it can find the right thing the right way. And in theory, it's possible to use the agent to enrich your chart description and enrich your dashboard description. So that's an option if you trust the agent to produce, this metadata or those semantics.
I think we got through the bulk of the broad questions, so we'll wrap it up here. Wanted to thank everybody for joining us today, and very much excited to hearing your feedback as you get your hands on this. So please do reach out if you want to enable it, and then reach out if you have any questions or feedback as you try it out. And be sure to register for the next event, which is the Chatbot demo, and we'll show you how that more kind of hands-on interactive chat experience interacts with this MCP service to give you access to everything in Preset. So looking forward to that. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you all, hosts and panelists, for making this happen.
Thank you.